the farmlands are produced for industry. They're corn and soy for industry only, for additives and supplies, fuel mixtures and other things. They do not grow their own fresh food. In fact, they're kind of inundated by these Dollar Generals, these little stores that supply them with processed food. So we find that the other really major food desert is occurring right in the middle of our rural environments. And that's, they're becoming obese and they're becoming unhealthy. It exacerbates it.
Yeah, this is crazy. I mean, no, I mean, I think it's an interesting perception, but I mean, this is also like something I always wonder how to battle that. And now we come back. Now one of our professors when we were studying at the Berlage Institute in Rotterdam was Roemer van Thorn, and he wrote this very interesting article, The Society of the Ant, and I think it relates a little bit, if I remember correctly, to Ulrich Beck and the notion of first modernity and second modernity. That first modernity was a project to try to battle scarcity in a way, with agricultural production, scarcity in terms of bad living conditions for everybody. But this fighting the scarcity, which used to help mankind sort of take its own life in turn, and now this technology we started to employ basically to provide everybody with food and healthy living conditions turned against us. Now, what used to solve problems is now part of the problem. And now we have all this environmental problem because this sort of battling scarcity turned into this capitalist logic of selling more and more, even if you don't need it. And this is what we're now facing a little bit. And probably the same logic applies a little bit to what you say with this, that the countryside is not even able to provide its own food because everything is used for whatever alternative fuel, or I don't know, and people are still eating this McDonald's crap, even if they could, have something better.
Yeah.
So we are sort of in this treadmill of commodification or consumption. Everything becomes consumption.
What do you make of Rem Koolhaas' new interest in rurality? Because he just had that big show at the Guggenheim, which was dedicated. He even planted a tractor in front of the building by Frank Lloyd Wright.
There are two things I would like to say. I mean, I very much respect his ingenious, but I also don't trust him entirely. You can also, he builds the CCTV building and he builds the biggest icons around the world, and then he steps up and says, now the time of the icon is over, right? So once he done it, he proclaims something else. So I have not seen the exhibition nor read enough about it in order to be able to really properly judge. So I would like not to do this, but at the first glance, it sounds a little bit fishy.
Yeah. I agree, but at the same time, I think he's correct in saying we should refocus to these areas. And I think that's what he first says, but yeah, it's convenient for him to want to get rid of all future icons. It's kind of like a labyrinth in Borges where we build a wall around it and don't allow a future to occur. So it's, but I do agree this refocusing on the rural, because it seems to be, we've always privileged the urban over rural in architecture. And
yeah, I mean, I think wasn't there also some part in this exhibition about, or was it another exhibition? I don't know. I cannot recall anymore. So of the architecture of the machines, that we build only buildings for machines and production, like the big Tesla factory, where everything is, there's no human being anymore. And all of a sudden, architecture will turn away from the human being and from needs of machines. Was this part of this exhibition? I remember I think there was he wrote something about it. I read a couple of months ago, if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't see the exhibit either, but I did read part of it. I just, I don't know. I can't comment.
He was criticized actually about this exhibition. and it was showy, you know. I mean, it's him, you know, he builds for Prada, and then he talks about the village. Well, what does the village have to do with Prada? There are two different ideologies, so to speak, two different realities. But I have a question for you. What if we replace the word modern or modern, which is a word that we cannot get rid of because we are so-called modern, all of us, and we have modern lifestyles and we build modern architecture. But what if we invent this word? I like to play with words, so please forgive me. Modern. Instead of M, to have N. What does the word modern suggest?
Modern.
Yes, not modern, but modern. Yes.
I don't understand it, Dan.
Okay,
quite honestly.
Maybe I don't understand it either. I'll try to explain. Modern comes from nod, to nod, which means, you know, to lower your head in some kind of an acceptance. So modern architecture would be kind of an architecture that it is kind of connected with modernity, because between northern and modern is not a big distance, linguistically speaking, but on the other hand has some kind of gentleness because of the act of nodding. I don't know.
It sounds more like a capitalist, opportunistic way of doing architecture. If you only nod and do things.
Right, nodding, nodding.
So not exactly the either it's like the politeness and you say yes, but not yes. I do it more like yes, I understand you. Or
no, because I thought we could have a congress of northern architecture, not modern architecture, but northern architecture. Some kind of linguistic exasperation that tries to infuse new blood in the word modern, because you know, it seems we cannot breathe without modernity. But maybe there is a softer kind of modernity, the second modernity that you actually mentioned. You know, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, look, but do we need to replace modernity all the time? Because I mean, if you look at architectural history and what people came up with, and postmodern structuralism, metabolism, all these whatever movements within architecture with their ideologies and maybe even manifestos, they were always coming back to doing away with modernism in a way. It's always a project of criticizing it. And so I mean, I wonder if we, you know, instead of trying to completely get rid of it, is there possibility to transform it?
Well, that's exactly what I suggested. A road to modernity. It's just a transformation. You just change a letter. Did you notice this is a practice used by marketing people? You know, you instead of having Giorgio Armani, you have Giorgio Arnani, and they sell their things because you think you buy an Armani, but you actually buy an Arnani. It's not. It's not the same thing.
This reminds me to this fantastic internet story of I think this was this dude in London, and he found, I think it was if I can really recall it, he found this Pakistani cheap clothing, sort of like a little bit fake, and he started to PR this guy and run around in the fashion shows with this completely no-name brand from a Pakistani backyard seamstress or clothing shop, and so he sort of lied his way up completely. He, so to say, how do you call it? Give me the word. Bullshitted himself into the high fashion scene with absolutely cheaply produced stuff somewhere from London. I found this story very, very interesting. Sort of this hijacking, you know, this subversive moment of hijacking, so to speak, high culture, you know. So maybe we need to hijack architecture, or we need to I don't know.
But back to the northern architecture, actually we have a very good example of a practice that has become successful by saying yes to everything, by nodding. Björk Ingels group, big. They're not critical. They say yes to everything. Yes city, yes rural, yes any possibility. And I don't know, they're making the most out of what is possible, right? They're being the most opportunistic within within capitalism in a way.
Yeah, but that's sorry, Daliana. That's exactly what I try to move away from. That there is a reverent, a deeply felt and modest kind of nodding that is totally absent in the practice of big. That I'm not referring to an opportunistic acceptance, but to a softening of the aggression, which otherwise we might not be able to avoid. Like almost of a religious nature, of a spiritual nature, and that kind of spirituality is totally absent today in most. But I understand it. The risk is there to transform something positive into something negative. I think a critical, that's why, anyway, I should not go back to the Sir Norman Foster, because it bothers me, Sir Norman Foster, that he's totally uncritical also,
Yeah, but we agree upon
with big, indeed.
We agree upon that. But this is something what you mentioned is, this is what I find very interesting about our society, our maybe even Western democracy, that we're the only system so far which is able to incorporate criticism and make it a product in the end and make it very successful in sort of silencing criticism by making it part of the system, by absorbing it.
Well, that's very perverse. That's very
it's absolutely perverse, but if you think about it, it's ingenious. Dictators, kings, what did they do with dissidents and people who had a different opinion? They executed them. Democracy is the only way of governing that somebody like Michael Moore becomes like filthy rich with his criticism, and now it's probably already part of the system.
Exactly.
So the system is able to shut everybody up. If you're successful and loud enough, then you become part of the status quo, and that's it.
Well,
I mean,
Florian, what does Harvard do? What does Columbia do? They buy the avant-gardists. They invest in the avant-gardists, and by doing this, they annihilate them. It's like there is this saying, to caress a cat to death. That's exactly what happened. They caress the avant-gardists to death. They pay them huge salaries. They hire them as director of I don't know what experimental lab, and that's it. The avant-gardist disappears because it's caressed by the system. This is the genius of capitalism. It destroys the avant-garde. There is no avant-garde these days. Because once you step out as some kind of avant-gardist, I mean, look at Bansky. He's himself, even if he doesn't show up, he's still part of the system in absentia. So it is the genius, one of the genius, I mean, maybe it has many sides, but the genius of capitalism is, okay, I am going to buy the one who is against me, and I'm going to cover him with honors and with big money, and so the avant-gardist will mellow down.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, how much hate and opposition could you have if you receive $200,000 a year or something like this?
I mean, as punk became mainstream in fashion, so became squatting, for instance. We have been living in the Netherlands for several years, and we know a lot of people. So if in the Netherlands, it's the law, when a house is more than 1 year unoccupied and not under renovation, you can break in, you call the police and say, I'm squatting, because the house is not in use, and the Netherlands is very dense, and if livable space is not in use, then other people have the right to occupy it and squat. So, and of course, this started probably in the late 60s, and during that sort of times of free love and I don't know what. But then at a certain moment, you know, the city would like to have these houses back and whatever, or lay their hands on. And of course, these houses turned old and became a danger. So you know what the city of Rotterdam did? They said like, okay, we're going to tear these houses down, or you guys who squat these houses now, you will own the houses, but you have to renovate them. And of course, what did everybody do? They said like, yeah, cool. So they turned from squatters into house owners. Now, something they completely rejected, whatever, 15 years ago when they did it the first time. But because, I mean, they got used to it and they got acquainted to it, and the house they were living, they were squatting, brought to their heart. You know, it was an easy thing to make them part of the system. So now they are now loyal house owners, maybe just, you know, eating a little bit more muesli and being maybe a little bit more vegan than the rest, but you know, they became nice citizens with that. Were put nicely into line.
Is it important to stay critical, to be critical all the time, actually? Should we criticize those who are critical?
I like that one.
Well,
I think the answer to that is yes, absolutely. We should never stop. It's just how we question and how we dialogue.
well, since we are between architects here, what about the critical regionalism of Kenneth Frampton?
Oh.
Okay, let's change the subject. Florian began to perspirate.
No, the thing is, like, I can't. I mean, I think I met him once in the Berlage in a very high age, and he's a very respectable person. But I'm not too familiar about this line of thought exactly. That I'm not going to say something, you know, stupid.
Well, he's a frustrated man, you know, he didn't build. So, you know, I think any theoretician who, you know, has a frustration somewhere, you know, it must be hard.
Yeah, but I really can relate to that because, you know, when we were in the Netherlands, still we started our company there. Then there was also the maybe as a little bit as an excuse, the financial crisis. And so we had very little chance to build something. And then for me, coming to Indonesia was a sort of an act of liberation of being able to finally really realize projects and get them built. And I think it must be frustrating for a lot of people, and also especially maybe in the United States, young architects, that the whole landscape is sort of filled with Genslers and I don't know, this very huge companies having the market completely divided. I mean, I think in Europe, at least, as a young architect or a smaller company, you have the chance to do something, but also with the competition mechanisms that, you know, competition also to small and medium-sized companies. But I had the feeling, and maybe Craig, you can tell me more about, but I had the feeling in the US, if you're not like a big company, it's really difficult, and a lot of people are designing the PS1. You know, that's the end game almost, you know, for this.
Yeah, I think you're hitting it on the nail. I mean, our students, particularly, you know, they get out of school and the goal is to go work for a company, rather large one. The bigger the better, and to become part of the system in many ways. And very little can be done in terms of just starting your own firm fresh out of school or otherwise, you know, or even just traveling or otherwise. So this has been true for some time because I originally went to school in Texas, and everyone went to one firm afterwards. You know, it's quite a large firm, and it's gotten huge today, which is HKS, which is a gigantic firm. But yet that firm is now kind of, I guess, multiplied itself in many ways. And now it has rather experimental, almost like mini universities within it. So some of these firms are are their own entities beyond the institution and the commercialization, right? Gensler is we visited them last year. Actually has a whole series of experimental groups that they allow to simply be proposed, and if they are successful, they go forward, and if they don't, they kind of fade away, and then other ones come in. And so firms are starting to have research divisions and experimentation, and like HKS now has a whole kind of parametrics group that is looking at how to change the mode of production, and when I worked there out of school, it was just a sweatshop. And now it's much different. It's much more of an environment where people almost live like a lived work community in some ways. And not that I'd ever go back, but yeah, it is directed towards working for the company, and very few small firms or entities do well in this environment.
But I think this is also related to the high tuition fees, right? Because I mean, you don't have the luxury after you pay whatever hundreds of thousands of dollars in the end totally in tuition fees to go for a small company and say like, okay,
they'll be in debt for the next 20 years. Yeah. So we had 4 students who went to Michigan, Penn, Buffalo, and another one, and they determined themselves to be $250,000 in debt after 2 years of masters between the 4 students. And there's no way they're going to have money for capital or anything after that. You know, they're part of the machine. They have to work. So
that's crazy. I mean, because I mean that already answers in a way the question of criticality and experimentation. You know, because if you don't have the financial freedom to do so, you know, you either try to get a job as maybe a teaching assistant in the beginning or whatever in the university. But then you're not practicing because the university sucks you up, or you go for this big companies and they suck you up. You know, this is.
So you're hitting it right on the nail, because when I'm an academic, and you're almost immediately put into almost a conflict of interest with practice, and I practiced for 20 years, but that 20 years was intermittent with this, like I said, putting out the commercial architecture and getting caught up with the turning hot dog on the spigot. You know, that's how you feel at times. And so but it's not like Europe in a sense where the academics and professionals seem to blur in many ways. And so it's either one or the other, and that's a common language that occurs, that there's somehow a difference between the two. And we're trying to dissolve that within our own kind of atmosphere. But we're in a small university down in a rural community, very isolated from the other universities. So we can experiment theoretically and things, but we have very little connection to the profession as far as, you know, the urban environments. I mean, so yeah, some people have to take on internships or like you said, to liberate oneself by moving, by becoming nomadic. And my internship was in Berlin, and I just left and went. But my colleagues did not, right? So they get caught up in that. It's maybe more mobile as an adult. So.
Yeah, well, although we share the same screen, I do not always necessarily agree with Florian. I mean, in a way, I think if you want to do experiments, there are many ways. I mean, if you blame the system and there is always not enough resources and means, and they're just excuses. I mean, let me give an example of Bureau Spectacular. Probably you've heard of them. I think they're really good. I mean, we know him personally, Jim Lai, and so I forgot where he's working in a university. He's teaching, and I mean, I remember he told me how he set up his studio and did his mock-up experimentation. He made his own installation with the salary that he received from the university. So he lived like a student. He saved his money, and then he used this money to actually buy materials to build his what do you call it, his installations. I mean, I met him in the Netherlands when he was interning for Atelier van Lieshout, this Dutch artist, very, very interesting, by the way. yeah, I mean, there are always ways, and you can always experiment, and probably, yeah, there are always, yeah, possibilities, I would say.
I think one has to reinvent themselves or to interrupt their lives at key locations in their lives to make sure they're not falling into these modes, right? So like, you know, and become personal decisions in many ways. I agree with you. There's ways to break those getting stuck or making excuses. You know, so one thing I enjoy about here in this area is that we do have room for experimentation. We do have room to take on projects without being caught up with some of the tenure track and other functions, and we encourage it. Though the previous generation here tried to kill it, so we're actually shifting it that way. So there are no excuses. We make all the time, and we remake ourselves as best we can. So,
Craig, I want to tell you that I received some very, very nice projects from your school, from your architecture school, from the studio of Peter Smith.
yeah, Peter's fantastic.
He's still teaching there?
He teaches here. He teaches our foundation, and then he's crazy. We love him.
No,
so.
But I launched a competition, a house for Lady Gaga, some years ago. And he sent, I mean, all the students in his studio sent a project, and they were excellent. I mean, I could tell them to you, they're truly very, very nice, conceptually and artistically, and very, very experimental, very open-minded. I love all of them, really. I think something beautiful is happening in your school. If such projects were generated in this atelier, this studio, I found it very refreshing. I receive sometimes projects from so-called very big universities, but less interesting than these ones. I don't know what Peter is doing, but he did well with this project.
We enjoy him a lot because he does spur questions, and he spurs different ways of looking at things. So we always come back, like this summer we're doing a regional studio with our entering graduates, and predominantly online. So we introduce a series of wicked problems that are global problems to them as an introductory project, and then we draw them back to, say, their hometown, and we show that there's a dialogue happening between these locations, and we say that during the problem solving, it's not inventory. It's you have to draw back with this kind of ask a more beautiful question approach, and say what is the problem at hand? Is the problem at hand, just scarcity of resource, or scarcity of access to things, or is it more of a scarcity of spirit or otherwise? So we're always coming back with this ask a more beautiful question, and shifting the lens just when we think we've solved something.
But by the way, what happened to the competition with the Lady Gaga? Does Lady Gaga know that some people will
we received about 50, 60 projects, some of them very interesting. And yes, the idea was to have Lady Gaga know about this, but my ability to arrive at Lady Gaga was very, very low. So I couldn't. I couldn't. We did the same with Pink Floyd. I launched Breaking the Wall, a house for Pink Floyd, and we got some incredible projects. Also for David Bowie, but I don't have. This is my deficiency. I think I have some ability to initiate, let's say, a competition, but in the final phases, I fade away. I don't have the resources. I'm not good at public relations. How am I going to bring the projects for a house for Lady Gaga to her knowledge? I mean, it's impossible to reach such a person. The only success I had was to contact Yoko Ono, but in the end was a failure. And I can explain you why. I had this idea to launch every 4 years when a city hosts an Olympics, on the occasion of the Olympics, to build a house of peace. So every 4 years to have like a constellation of small houses of peace in conjunction with the Olympics. So because I knew that Yoko Ono was almost obsessed, or at least, this is what she claimed, by peace. And plus I used the word, the song Imagine of John Lennon. So I struggled to contact her. I managed to to find a way to contact her through one of her secretaries, and then a lawyer from her wrote to me saying they love the idea, but it's a little too late to do something because I wanted to launch this competition when the Olympics took place in Rio de Janeiro. And this year was supposed to, I failed with Rio de Janeiro. Then I said, I'll do it with Tokyo, but I failed with Tokyo too, because I guess she said, I like the idea, but I cannot get involved and things like this. It's very, very hard to move these people who are unmovable because they are, they are rich, they are famous. I don't know. And sometimes beautiful things could happen, but it's very hard. It's my inability. I cannot do it. For example, this year I tried with Utrecht in the Netherlands to launch with the Constant Foundation the New Babylon competition, and I failed to them too because you know the story, Florian and Taliana. So. Yes. I don't know. I will still launch it myself now in July, but without any chance of getting an institutional umbrella. That's a problem. I don't offer prizes. I don't offer anything. Still, people send works, and I don't know. Anyway, Lady Gaga. Yeah, I would love her to see these projects and invest in one of them and build one, not the one in front of San Pietro in Rome, where a student from Craig's school proposed a funambulesque structure right in the middle of the big space surrounded by the Bernini colonnade. Very courageous proposal. Now, I think Daliana is right. There are no excuses, really. I mean, if you truly want to be creative, you find a way. Maybe not as problematic as Lebia-Suits found, because I don't know if you know, Lebia-Suits was supporting himself by doing perspectives for large companies. So he was so-called Metec. He was a maverick. He was the man who didn't sell his soul, but he actually labored every day on perspectives for some commercial nonsense, signed by big companies in New York. So he was doing perspectives because we all have to eat something. So we have to negotiate with reality. We have to earn a little bit of money, not as much as he earned because he loved to eat big steaks in expensive restaurants, but you still have to survive. And how do you do it? How can you keep your experimental side fresh and active and at the same time not sell your soul? How could you do it? It's not easy. Somebody said the ideal in life is to do what you love to do and get paid for it. But it's very hard to find such a paradise on this earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is like for smaller offices, this is a lot like this, that you have the bread and butter projects, where you maybe don't have this much of a design ambition, but then they pay well. And then you have projects which you can pour more your heart and your soul into. So, yeah, that's how it is.
Florian, Italiana, I received very nice reactions to your presentation. Some people wrote to me that they were very impressed that you have high standards and you have a certain idealism, but this idealism is not divorced from reality, but it is actually part of what we call reality. So in that sense, I think your practice is remarkable. because it's easy in a way to find refuge in the attic of your house and imagine the Newton's cenotaph or I don't know what, because you are in the attic of your house and your mom is bringing you bread and butter from time to time, and that's it. You don't need anything else. But life is not like this. You get a wife, maybe I don't know, some kids show up, and what do? The idealist goes to the gutter. By the way of idealism, I invented another word besides not them, which I'm not sure I convinced you with, but I invented another word, mudkitect. From instead of star, you place mud, M-U-D, so mudkitect. The mudkitect is the opposite of the starchitect, because it's the work in the gutter.
Oh, mudkitect with a D, M-U-D.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, the opposite of the starchitect. So you have the starchitect and you have the mudkitect.
Yeah, but I'm very happy and very glad that people appreciated our lecture, and of course it's also a struggle in a way to get there, and personal development in a way, because look, after the Berlach, I was dabbling in parametric design and worked for you in studio for 3 years, and it's extremely affluent and technologically driven architecture, which not everybody can afford. And then you come to Indonesia, and then you have to sort of start to understand what people can do, and you need to start thinking about how do you design in a completely different way, because they cannot build everything, and you still would like to have a good result. And then you have two ways. Do I try to impose myself on a local culture, which maybe is not able, technologically speaking, to realize that in a very good way, and also the projects don't have this sort of budget, or and this is my belief at least, say like, okay, reality is as such and I cannot change it, but I can try to place myself in the boundary, in the realm of the possible, and then I try to poke from inside this envelope and try to incrementally try to broaden this envelope, rather than, because I mean, a lot of times if you have a project, a real project, and you place yourself outside of the realm of the possible, you become like sort of almost like a clown, they don't take you seriously anymore. So you have to place yourself inside, and then you have to try to become as close to the border of the impossible and try to push from the inside. And I think this is what we're trying to do with our work, And the second thing is, if you get married, then you better choose the right wife, a smart wife, like I did. Then a lot of things are solved for you.
He's saying this without alcohol, so this is real.
But I'm still wearing my sarung.
Did any of you, these 9 people, including me here, read Gaston Bachelard? Because tomorrow is the Gaston Bachelard Day, and I'm going to invite people to talk about. I didn't read him carefully either, but I think I mean, he's very relevant to architecture, and he said something.
Gaston Bachelard.
Yes, Bachelard, yeah.
French philosopher.
Yes. Yes. And by the way, last night I was laboring that I usually don't like to plan much or almost anything, but I discovered a site where I just typed in birthdays of famous architects, and this site showed up where I got all of them. I mean, all of them for every month, July, August, September, and October. So I made a list with the most important celebration, so to speak. So I'm going to send them to you, and you choose from the menu. For example, you would like to talk, I don't know, about Peter Behrens, or I don't know.
So
you can do so.
We're doing necropolis urbanism.
Exactly. While you are having a dialogue with the right person. When I was in Paris, I wanted to start me. I never started any business. I'm not good at it. But I thought of launching some kind of little business called Domus Eterna to design actually graves. You know, like no, but I think it's important because in that rectangle, 1 meter by 2 meters, you have
Oh,
to you have to say, pardon?
Have you ever been to this amazing place near Genoa? This forgot this city of the dead, where these amazing statues are. These very
Where?
naturally marble statues. It's I need to get the name. Wait a second. Let me.
Okay, then I wasn't there because if you don't remember the name, it means I wasn't there. No, I'm talking about you know, because the grave. I mean, I don't want to be morbid, but the grave of let's say Albert Camus should be different
Staglieno.
Pardon?
Staglieno, monumental cemetery of Staglieno.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, you have to go there. If you, I mean, Romanians understand Italian, right?
Yeah, kind of, yes.
Kind of. Then this is.
Yeah, we also get easily, you know, coronavirus. So now it's not the time to visit, you know, these sites, particularly these sites. No, but please send me the information, Florian. Yes, I would like to investigate.
Such an impressive place. All these statues and all these arcades, and you walk there. If you look at pictures and at this craftsmanship and all these rich merchants, you know, where all the statues is, you have this textile and cloth around. This is like really a mystical place. This is so amazing. I mean, they even have this so big, there even goes a bus line goes through it. If you ever have the chance and can travel again to northern Italy, you have to go there. This is simply, it's the most astonishing place I've been ever. I mean, really, this is something I was so impressed by the atmosphere and the sheer size as being really a city for the dead.
Well, by the way of this, I don't know if you know, there is an island kind of near Bronx in Manhattan, in New York City, where now they bury the people who die because of the very large number who die because of the pandemic. And so the whole island is the island of the dead, actually. And the name of the island is Hart, H-A-R-T. So of course, this was another occasion to allow my imagination to imagine another competition. And I wrote already the text because I think we devalued death. But if that island of the dead becomes actually the focus of our creative energies and also reverence for, you know, the fragility of life, and in a way it could become the island of life, not the island for life, not the island for the dead. And it's very interesting that now it's a very depressing place because, you know, the bodies are thrown there like in a you know, collective grave. But somehow, and I think this is, anyway, I'm not very coherent now, but I think it's important to reflect on the fragility of life and try to, yeah, to express even architecturally a concern for the afterlife. And the cemetery could be you know, could actually be a yes to life and not a no to life. It depends how it is done. I don't think I explained very well. I apologize. Please forget.
No. I mean, I sort of understand what you're hinting at. I just cannot put my finger on it entirely. I mean, I get you what you mean. Because I mean, all in all, I mean, a cemetery is actually not a place for the dead. It's a place for the living to go there and remember, right? Because the dead are just sort of lying there.
Yes,
but how do you design a place for the living to contribute to the memory and the good times and whatever you had with your loved ones, right? So, and in that sense, if you go to a very regular graveyard behind the Catholic Church, it's just rows and rows of graves. That's it, right? And this is interesting. Currently I cannot do it, but I find in Bandung we also have a very big Muslim graveyard, and I haven't had the chance to go there, but people are living there and working there, and sort of they live amongst the dead. So I wanted to see how this is playing out and how this works. So once this pandemic is over, I really need to go there, because I have seen some nice graveyards here too, but I mean there's a very, very big one where it incorporates really settlements for the living, because usually in a smaller graveyard you have next to the church you maybe have the gardener or the caretaker, but he leaves and does not live there. But in that sense, there are people living among the dead. I would like to see and experience that, what it means, what are their conditions and how do they arrange themselves amongst the graves, as a space for the not only visitors but really permanently living there.
I want to ask you something, all of you here now. Alvar Aalto said architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization. What do you make of this statement?
Well, first we need to define culture versus civilization.
Exactly, please do so if you can. So architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization.
Difficult.
And how would you separate culture from civilization?
Well, how do you think, we have to imagine we can only imagine, what Alvar Aalto wanted to say. But by the way of this, what would you say of a festival of uncivilized architecture?
I think we already do that.
Very much so, no, Craig? All over the world.
All over the world.
Yeah, but I understand very much your point, and you are right. But now I'm thinking of a different kind of uncivilized architecture. One relating to what Alvar Aalto said, that it belongs to culture, not to civilization. An abrupt statement from an architect who was not famous for being abrupt in his, his statements. I was very surprised when I read it. Maybe it's not true, because on the internet you can find all kinds of fake news. Maybe this quotation is not correct. I don't know, but it intrigues me. It belongs to culture, not to civilization.
I think another way of looking at that would be through, say, Islamic view towards cities and of city growth through, say, Ibn Khaldun or Al-Ghazali, where the city of tranquility is one where we negotiate a concept called Umran, which is that which is agreed upon by civilized people. And I think that's a more interesting approach towards city development and organic growth. Where civilization depends, the physical world depends on that civil agreement. I think it also roots with culture. I don't think you could separate.
Well, I think architects who say that their work belongs to culture is probably not able to to satisfy the budget nor the needs of the building, and treat it as a sculpture and art. That's why this person would say that his work is that belongs to the culture. But how about the word society? I mean, architecture and society, isn't it more of a word than civilization? Civilization seems to be a very big word, and I don't understand quite the word civilization. Are we civilized enough to call ourselves having a civilization?
I think there should be a shift from society to community in a sense, where we look at the notion that society is structure and community is anti-structure. And I think it's where we get back to the discussion of the donkey, where that which is agreed upon is a zigzagging effect. It's the community forms through relations, or poetics of relation, as Gaslan would say, where that agreeability is a form of tranquility, of growth together, in a sense. So society tends to be a set of rules or things. It's like the difference between ethics and morals or something. They're quite different.
I think this is a very interesting point, because I have this young guy and I'm trying to teach him a little bit about architecture, and then I have this very simple theory reader by Charles Jenks, and then I came across this primer of Team 10 from Aldo van Eyck, where he speaks about instead of space and time, we need to consider mankind, or man, or people, and we should replace this with the notion of place and location. And maybe along this line, goes the idea of the community versus the society, right? Because a community is always specific to a certain interest, specific to a certain maybe neighborhood and locality, versus the society is very big and very abstract, and difficult to design. To design for it is too generic, too general. So like space and time is also relatively abstract. So if you want to add to this notion of or the idea, or continue the idea of place and occasion, so then comes community as the next logical step within this row of words, I would say.
That's why Henri Lefebvre says the idea of community cripples architects. We prefer society. We prefer the rules. We prefer to replace world with generic items. I think it's what Lewis Woods was talking about. It's an act of violence to put down something that is out of one's mind and imposed upon others.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also guilty of that, I have to say, because as soon as
we all are. I mean, design is revisionary. I mean, we do this. We disrupt, and but it depends on whether it's done with care or with a dialogue at stake, versus say an overt sculpture which overrides purely in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, it also goes. I mean, if you talk about community-driven architecture or participatory architecture, where you then really sit down with the community and talk, then a lot of architects, including me, are scared to take sort of the design vision and the design decision out of their hands, and all these efforts of years of training and becoming an expert in your field, you leave to the layman, all of a sudden. So I must say, I mean, I'm not entirely there yet. I mean, we work a lot with communities and talk with them, but I cannot let go yet. Or
I agree. I mean, there's a side that people hire you for your knowledge also, right? It's like going to a doctor. I hate to use that analogy, but you don't go to a doctor because you already know how to fix yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, doctor is a need, architecture is not a basic necessity.
Yeah. But can you imagine me going to my doctor and telling them how to do it and how much I wanted to pay, right?
A lot of community architects end up being a drafter for the community instead of actually giving expertise. Yeah,
I agree. I don't think we should completely let go, but at the same time, we don't go in there with a bulldozer and say we're here to change your life. And I think there's a wonderful dialogue that occurs, and maybe that's where Alvar Aalto is, because when you look at his work in one place versus another, he works quite differently between places, and maybe that's why Frampton uses him as example in this critical regionalist approach, because most modernists at that time were actually very engaged with dialogue, an emerging form of research at the time.
Do you know that Alvar Aalto used to do something incredible? He would submit several projects to the same competition, and he would win both the first prize and the second prize. It's unbelievable. I mean, I would be happy with an honorable mention. He got the first prize and the second prize, and I think once he won the first three prizes.
Yeah, we also have an office here in Bandung Urbane. They were also in our lecture. They also always submit several entries for one and the same competition. Sometimes they win, but also not always, you know.
Yeah. Hi, Dan. I just wanted to touch upon the, the topic of civilization and culture. So I actually grew up in the country of Oman, if anybody knows it here. So I feel like the city of Muscat is a very good example of, like known for its culture and very, even architecture wise, they've, even any forward or future designs are always based strongly on the culture of the place, as well as, I guess the rest of Middle East, when you look at it from the other side, they think this is like more of a rural approach to things, but actually it's a very successful model if you see, like, because the infrastructure and the people and the thinking of, the civil are very civilized and, advanced in general, compared to what you see like, places right next door, which is 45 minutes away, like Dubai or anything which has completely lost its identity. Like there's Hong Kong in one place, there's one place looks like Vegas or whatever. So I feel like it's so important to, architecturally, to preserve that culture, but also advance and evolve, with the times, but also stand for something in a way.
Mm-hmm. I saw this in Doha. I was out there at Virginia Commonwealth, and Doha in Qatar is completely without any real identity, in my opinion. It's just a lot of buildings kind of thrown into an area, and they're 15% occupied, while the Nepali workers, they lose 2 to 3 a day on the highway jobs, live in tents on the outside of the city, and it's just a horrible dichotomy between this kind of in the long run, slavery mixed with empty buildings. It just doesn't seem to mix. So there's this loss in between as well of that respect for humankind, this human dignity that is put in there as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of competition, and I think it just like brings different problems with it. Like, I don't know, the higher skyscraper you go, the greater depression that country or city goes into, it's usually, there is probably some inverse equation between, forwarding in civilization and going down in the economy in a way as well. So I don't know, I feel like Oman and Muscat do it with that stability by, respecting that culture. And, I think in the Middle East, it's a very important aspect because of, maintaining peace and not conflict in a way, even though it's in an area full of conflict. And, if it wasn't for the civilization and probably also, with the main ruler of the state, of the country, their mindset really kind of influences the people and the civilization, and making it the for what it is in terms of valued, in terms of the culture and things like that. And it's very successful in terms of tourism and everything else, in terms of its architecture as well. So I do agree with that, with the statement of Alto, actually. In a situation like this, yeah.
So should we initiate a festival of uncivilized architecture? No, I'm serious. I'm not joking. The first festival of uncivilized architecture.
At least you be calling it out in public, all right? So identify it. Let's give it awards, like the in the UK when they give the Carbuncle Award. So for failed projects.
So by the way of this, I had some interest in what is called feral architecture, F-E-R-A-L. What would feral architecture be? Because in a way it's exactly this, an uncivilized architecture, feral. I had to look in the dictionary to translate the word, but now I know what it means. But it is connected to the donkey.
But do you see the uncivilized architecture as something positive in the sense of maybe the vernacular architecture or architecture without architect's idea, or do you see the breaking conventions? Or I mean, because I mean, if I would say that a Trump Tower is also very uncivilized architecture in a way.
Unbearably so, I agree.
Unbearable.
So
And
It's
not
the
just,
latest point in Chicago.
and not just a tower.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So do you see it as the notion of something positive, the uncivilized architecture, or is this a critique?
Of course positive, otherwise I wouldn't promote it.
Yeah, but I mean, you also have the Razzies, and it's like, seems to be a fun event, right? And some of these actors are even showing up to take the Razzie home.
No, but in my case, it's mostly a reaction to the university here, where they are taught architecture mainly, you know, surrounding the big cosmical problem of how to place in the perfect position the refrigerator in a kitchen 2 meters by 3 meters. These are, you know, this is the essence of architecture. This is the crux. This is all there is, and then follows the parking lot, the parking spot. And then, of course, the toilet. So there you have, you know, that's the discussion about architecture: the refrigerator, the toilet, and the parking spot. You know, I mean, then of course I ran towards Alvarado and I beg him to save me, because when he says, you know, architecture belongs to culture, that's not what I see here. That's what disturbs me very much. You know.
I think it was mentioned earlier, I think the structure right now is that it belongs to production. I mean, I'm not saying that in a facetious way. I mean, it was mentioned earlier that we've been pushed into this kind of wheel of production. I call it a hot dog on a spigot. You know, it's kind of, we watch the hot dog go around and just repeat the toilet, repeat the thing. As long as you get that right, you get a check in the box, you get a degree, you're an architect, and you take your test and all that good stuff. But it's not about this changing of oneself and changing of one's society, and to look and critique about things. You know, we say if you get things in the right order, and then you're hired to draft for them. You know, and I think that's what's happening within our profession. It's been overtaken by production, and it doesn't help that we have software that becomes a wonderful mechanism for that.
Yeah, I mean, especially when it comes to software. I mean, I'm myself an avid software user, and I like my software. I like to use my Rhino and things like that. But BIM is really a horror show for me. I mean, so when people start to design right away in Revit, you know, I mean, this is so limiting. This is like, I don't know, as if you only give a 45-degree ruler to somebody, or I don't know if you, yeah, it's really a bottom up design exercise, but not in a sense of design exploration, but in the sense of product design or car manufacture design, that you have architecture around a sort of platform of pre-manufactured elements, where you have to compose then your building from standardized doors and walls and whatever, rather than thinking the architecture from both sides. So yeah, when this Revit logic is like the hyper rational is imposing itself so strongly on the design. Yeah, I don't understand why people would like to use this, especially early on in the design process, where you should be as free and flexible as possible.
The problem is for our students that it makes things that look like buildings. And they think, you know, it must be a building. How can you tell me it's not? How can you tell me what I'm doing is wrong? So, I mean, we all produce, especially when a whole class produces the same thing, and you can tell what software developed it. And we're starting to see
Yeah.
buildings that you can tell what software they use, and so forth and so on. So
Oh, that's horrible.
I mean, look, it makes things that look they're very convincing. So that's part of the problem.
Nowadays I'm not as good anymore, but I used to be quite okay with Grasshopper, right? And I try to come up with these super complicated swooshing structures. Thinking about how the geometry could locally change on this different geometry in order to bring daylight in a certain way. And I found this always very satisfactory that you're using this tool to generate a certain complexity which you could not do otherwise, right? Because it was physically impossible as an architect to draw all these segments or these elements you populate a geometry with. But I found this a very, very, even though it is in a way rigid that you have to set it up in a certain logic in order to make it work. But then there's this extreme moment of creativity if you try to play with the visual code and create something with it. And I think this is exactly it's on one side it's very sophisticated also like BIM is, but this is a tool for where maybe creativity and engineering can meet, where the rational and the boundary between the rational and the creative or the creation almost, is sort of blurred, versus in BIM, this is just banal, there's
inventory.
Yeah.
So
I would ban BIM from universities. No, really.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't give it to early level students.
Yeah.
It's devastating. So.
No, back in the day when I started to study, I started to use 3D Studio Max, right? And then this is polygon modeling, and then you discover the incredible mesh smooth function. So everybody could see, is it a beginner in 3D Studio Max, because all of a sudden everything was a blob.
Blob with grips on it. So a blob with grips on it that you could pull and tug, and but there was always something nice, when CAD programs, really came out, and I may date myself here, but we were working with AutoCAD, and we worked with Integraph, and one thing that was nice about it is that when you started the program, it was a three-dimensional blank space. Right, of which you would draw in the same ways you would, by hand or otherwise, and be thinking it out spatially on multiple screens, which was quite interesting. And then AutoCAD also gave us automatically a way to reproduce Walmart's 100 times faster, right, in the same breath. And you're going, so one thing that was great is that we could do these things. We could take it out and be very technical and very precise. And then they turn around and it became just the production. Became so much faster in producing bad things, and so it's without a critical mind attached to it. It's one thing that we always promote here in academia is critical thinking, to be critical about why you're making a choice for something. Do not just react. Do not just produce without thinking. And we create intellect as well, and it isn't always about building buildings. It's about forming a body of knowledge. Peter Trummer made a really wonderful remark in his "What is Architecture?" It says some people think it's a body of work, some people think it's a body of theory. It is both. It both form a body of knowledge, and we make investments in our students to do that. It isn't always what I build; it's what seed I plant of what gets built later.
No, I totally agree. I mean, the first CAD program in the, what was it, late 60s, early 70s, I forgot the name of it. What I found very fascinating, it was already parametric, and then for a very, very long while, the CAD programs lost it. So what I mean with parametric is, if I draw a line, and I establish this line on a piece of paper, then I have in my head already the attribute towards this line that is maybe a part of a door, or a part of a wall, and it is attached to something, right? And this sort of intelligence is entirely lost if you draw and cut, right? Because as soon as you move the wall, the attached wall is not moving with it. So you're like endlessly busy moving this and moving this and moving this and adjusting with each other. And this very early CAD software, was already insofar parametric that you start from with your line, you start from a start point and an end point. And if you attach another line to this endpoint and you move this endpoint, the line is also dependent on it. So you could build up these dependencies. And I was always puzzled why this was lost over time, because this is sort of this certain beauty in potentially certain beauty in CAD software can be that you sort of establish a set of dependencies where everything is reacting towards it. You start changing it, So yeah, just as a thought on this the usage of the tool as such. But of course, you should never trust only one tool, I would say.
Yeah, though I encourage our students to always use their best in combination and check with each other. And some of them do better things better than others. We're also experimenting with gaming software to try to get into first-person design. That we design in perspective. Well, they've been Lumion is one of them, and Inkscape, but we've also been doing like 3D Unreal Engine. Some of the students are actually reasonably good at because it requires a little more coding, and they're able to pull it in. But they're able to create film and cinema from it, which is a more way of showing the product, I think. So this is section.
Great for me. I wanted to ask you: is the T-square and the rectangle still used in your school?
Peter introduces it to them in freshmen. They do a lot of hands-on, and he makes them do it, and then there's this intermixing that occurs in freshmen, right? So we do a lot of hands-on making things, and he changes scale a lot. A lot of times the models he builds, they'll build like a Harley Davidson motorcycle, for instance, but 3 times the size out of cardboard, and they have to learn to build it and make it, and it's huge, and they have to pay attention to detail, and they have to have craft in that, and then they shift to how that coloration or framing of it into digital or otherwise. But they generally start off with hands-on, and we always appreciate that the students that don't get it that transfer in, you can tell the difference.
So for how long do the students use the T-square and the rectangle?
Oh, I think it depends. I mean, I think it's very short in the freshman studio, but they come back to it in some of the model making.
No, I asked because at the university here, the students for at least 2 years, if not 3 years, they work just with the T-square and the rectangle. And we had a very interesting engineer. I'm surprised he's not here, from Los Angeles, who has an important position at the OVR. I'm still hesitant to pronounce this name, although it has just a few letters, but I'm not sure I pronounced well. But you understood, this very famous engineering firm. And Bruce, who made a presentation on his work, and he also worked 4 years with Peter Rice, who was considered a genius in engineering, and he has very wide cultural interest. He's truly a very special engineer and very experienced. He said the T-square and the rectangle are actually good because the body is involved. When you work just with softwares, he said there is no body activity really. It's everything. It's the mind that acts, but the body is not involved. But I don't know. I mean, some physicality is required even for the laptop and the computer. Plus, on the other hand, is the physicality involved with the T-square and the rectangle so great or so beneficial? I mean, it is restrictive itself. You draw, straight lines, and you are kind of restricted to, at the most 60 degrees paradigm, like Frank Lloyd Wright used it. So I don't know. What if we renounce the T-square and the rectangle, and could we also renounce the new technologies, and try to go back to the poor donkey who is now bored because we don't talk about it? Or by the way, how is it correct to talk about a donkey, with it or him? Or Craig, please tell me, because I'm confused.
What was the question again? I don't fully understand about the donkey.
When you talk about the donkey, is it an it or a him?
It's an it. Yeah.
An it, right? Okay. I hope.
But we often interchange the word donkey with ass. You know, so you know we have to be careful about that. So,
right, but still, it's it. It's not him or he, right?
Yeah, it's an it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, in a donkey world, we are it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They don't look at us any other way.
Very well put. Thank you.
Maybe they're cat,
everything's an it.
Maybe they're cat donkeys instead of cat monkeys.
But then it is also, you know, how is it called? You know, not artificial intelligence. I see it everywhere. You know, IT. IT, right? IT.
Yeah.
Intelligent.
I don't think it's a question whether we have the T-square in hand and other things, because I think parametrics have always been there, and I think by shifting to that layer of just T-square, right angles, and otherwise, we may forget that the mathematics and the parameters were always there. You can go back to, Bernard Cash has a wonderful lecture on the connection with Albert Dürer or with Marcel Duchamp, this digitization where we understand it through the geometries and not necessarily through the flat plane, right? So I think the T-square is actually a more modern phenomenon, which was, you know, flattening things into orthographic. When in the Gothic period or whatever, they may have negotiated the parameters, the amplification of space in many different ways.
By the way of this, Craig, what do you think of, is manual perspective taught in your school?
Absolutely.
Really, I'm surprised.
And Peter's also very good with, you know, he directs our foundation. He's very good because he's also a photographer. He tries to get them to capture and frame things in space and then to redraw them and to understand them in how they're framed and how they're perceived. So yeah, the perspective it does play a big role, but I don't know how much they retain it though. I mean, because you get up in Western hit with our technical course. So we actually around the second year really, I mean, they're introduced to BIM and they're introduced to Revit and to Rhino as well and other software programs, partially because they go immediately into their structures and technologies courses which incorporate them. So they're doing their calculations for structures and learning their systems via these technologies, and they're taught very early. But they're also hit with the professors who believe that everything starts off with a plan, and then you beat that plan to death for 80% of the project. So while they get it in foundation, it seems to be kind of beaten out of them at sophomore and junior. And we're trying to figure out how to remove this. But I think this year we may be able to do that through what's called retirement. And we have new faculty coming in, which have brand new ideas. So I mean, it'll happen with time. But I think what happens is we'll get into urban design. We start talking about the participant, and we start talking about this kind of aesthetics, and they look at you and say, no, we draw plans, we draft, and you're going, well, this can't be beaten out of you, right? So we're trying right now. We're having a lot of trouble with our kind of mid-level courses and the professors who teach them. I mean, this kind of argument on what architecture is, and like you were saying, Dan, that they're more concerned about where the toilet, refrigerator, and parking lot is, and that you've gotten it right, check in the box, move on. And we're trying to figure out how to reintroduce and to keep it alive in a sense. It's beaten out of them. But I think it's happening in a lot of schools. I mean, we were up at U of I recently, and they were facing some very similar things. You know, these practitioners, so-called practitioners, come in and say, no, we don't theorize, we don't spatialize, we produce. And it starts with plans. No sections, no three-dimensionality, no tectonics, no discussions of space and movement. So it's happening in a lot of places. It's that production wheel.
Right. I have a question for you. Why do you think, I mean, I do not know, I mean, I cannot say for sure, but I never saw a perspectival drawing by Palladio. And perspective was already invented for 150 years. I'm sure he was aware of what Piero della Francesca and Brunelleschi invented or created, yet he never used perspectives. He only used Euclidean representations, you know, orthogonal drawings. And it's very interesting because this is the quintessential architect. I mean, we are talking about Andrea Palladio, and he never tried to, you know, to use perspectival drawing. How do you explain it? Because I don't know.
Well, I think he's at a period of time where this is starting to emerge. This is kind of, I mean, we always say, where does modernism start? But I think it's already starting at this point with the orthographic in production. We know Palladio because he published. And that was another thing that those drawings led to. So we see it in Wren and Evelyn and other, you know, the Adam Mesk in America. It's all Palladian.
Florian, what do you think? Do you think you can do architecture these days simply doing orthogonal work, plan, section, like Palladio, half section, half elevation, nothing, you know, no perspective, no funny renderings, nothing. Simply black and white line drawing representing truthfully what the building is without using any kinds of seductive, you know, renderings that are so possible these days.
I think there is I think we can discuss this question from several angles. What I encounter, I mean, look, we also have an Instagram account that runs quite well, and if you follow like what other people are doing, so there seems to be a big tendency currently to go back to the collage idea, you know, sort of to a simpler representation of architecture, not these high glossy renderings anymore. But even though digitally produced, it looks more like a two-dimensional or sort of a flat drawing, right? So there's or also going back to the axonometry rather than the perspective, because this is sort of a neutral idea of representation. So I think there's a certain fed upness with the extreme hyperreal digital in one movement of architecture, which is also I don't know, maybe these architects which bring back the arches, you know, as a module, or the flipped around arches in a U shape. Whereas I'm not so sure if this is not some sort of pseudo reminiscence to a 80s almost pop cultural or 90s almost pop cultural postmodernism. Now, if we now go to the really hardcore, really two-dimensional line drawings, it's difficult. I'm not entirely sure, because I guess depends on really what you're doing. Meaning, are you dependent on doing architecture for a living, and the client is expecting certain things? You know, will the client be satisfied with line drawing? Do you have the luxury to sort of establish your name only with these drawings, and then, you know, you will find clients by doing it that sort of way? And you can, now I know it is it sounds a little bit undecided, but I cannot define it better right now. I'm also a little bit tired. It's 20 to 1 where I am, but as I think is if it's a sort of a personal practice which does not care much about does it have to sell or does it have to be successful or does it have to be economically successful? I think there's a sort of for your own personal practice where you can detach yourself a little bit from that. And I think then you could really explore architecture a lot into this direction. But as soon as you need to sort of sell it a little bit and have a client with expectations, then I think it's tricky.
Are you aware? Do you know the website Sucker Punch Daily?
Yes, yes.
What do you think of the projects published there? What do you think of the projects that are published there?
I mean, we have, you know, as we have Corona grifting, we have also architecture entirely produced for social media, you know, which do not have any bearings in any realm. And I don't know if this is something good or something bad, because on the one hand, I appreciate very much speculative architecture or architectural design, which does not necessarily need to be produced. But then again, you know, if it's only produced with a motivation of getting likes and clicks on social media, then I think the speculative project sort of becomes dependent again on a sort of this market logic of value in form of exposure and being shared and reshared, and it becomes its own social media economy.
Yes, but Florian, some of the, you know, in a way, the best or the best known schools of architecture in the world have their students, you know, produce projects that are shown on this website. You really have, you know, excellent schools. So these are not. I mean, I don't know if we can, you know, not take them seriously because they.
No. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying seriously or not seriously. I'm just sort of. I mean, a very interesting project, and I'm having a look right now. I haven't been there for a very long time. And if there are, you know, student projects, then it's. I think an entire. Don't misunderstand me.
No, I understood what you said, and it's a valid, you know, question mark. But on the other hand, this site promotes some projects that are pushing, so to speak, the frontiers of architecture, and many students come from very good schools.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is one of these projects I'm seeing right now. Yeah. I haven't been there for a long time. Thank you for reminding me to check it out more often.
Yeah, maybe one day we can meet on Zoom and open up this site and talk about some projects that they publish there, because I think it's a provocative site.
Yeah, for sure. 100% agree. I have a former colleague of mine from UN Studio. He's also German. His name is Holger Hoffmann, and he's teaching. And I don't know if this has a homepage, but they also produce amazing drawings, and he also starts very often from a sort of sometimes neoclassical design idea, and then it gets transformed into structures which are super interesting and sort of expand on that thought in a completely different direction. You don't have Instagram, right?
No.
But anyway, guys, I'm getting so tired. I'm starting to struggle for words. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning for me, and thank you very much, and see you soon.
Yes, yep. You are welcome. Well, it's getting late here too, not for Craig.
You're just getting started here. So I appreciate very much the conversation and dialogue. It's, this is one of the things I look forward to on Fridays now. So Yeah.
Okay, Craig, we'll make sure we'll have a new dialogue next Friday. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much, Dan.
I appreciate
Nice to meet you,
your
Florian.
participation.
Yeah,
too,
thank
Craig.
you.
Thank you.
So yeah, please forgive me, but I've become a little bit less sharp, and I would like to leave with a good impression. So
Okay, perfect.
That's a good strategy. Have a nice sleep.
thank you.
Okay, bye. Thank you, Craig. Bye.
See you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So now we are, actually we are beginning to.
Thanks, Dan. I think I'm going to go too. It's almost 2 a.m.
Okay.
But this was really
My
good.
God, 2 a.m. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm a night owl.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Tomorrow. See you
Stay,
tomorrow.
stay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so now we have here almost, David is beginning to know Romanian. And Alex, there is an Alex here, and I don't know because I know several Alex. Alex, could you tell us, please, who you are? Alex. Anyway, his microphone is not on. But so tomorrow I plan to talk about Gaston Bachelard, whom I didn't read. But it's very interesting to talk about something that you do not know. I know a little bit, but he has some interesting ideas. So I think, okay, forget Gaston Bachelard. I have now list with suggestions for presentations for the whole month of July, and I'm going to send it to you. And if any subject there interests you, you can choose and prepare, a talk, a presentation about one of them. I found some very interesting so-called birthdays. I mean, not so-called birthdays. Some very important architects born in July. So it's a whole list with 30 names or so. And because I would like to be a collective, enterprise in a way. I invite all of you to, consider making presentations or about other subjects as well. Today we had an informal talk, and I think it was okay. It was fine, and tomorrow it will be another day. So I think. A very important theoretician of architecture who teaches at Princeton, Beatrice Colomina, and her husband is, the curator of the deconstructivist movement or exhibition, Mark Wigley. Well, Beatrice Colomina said that when there is an economical crisis, so when society has a crisis now, like we have now, because of the pandemic, but also, with reverberations in the economical field, exactly then, when there are problems, there is a flourishing of small avant-garde publications in architecture. She said that the most interesting, manifestos, little publications, they happened not when the society was doing well, but when the society had problems, like it has now. So I think, I don't know. I hope the pandemic will end, but we are still, immersed in the problems that it brought with it. I think these dialogues that we have could maybe, create some kind of a new, I don't know how to call it. I think we could, if we unite ourselves, we could generate something, something that I cannot describe now. For example, I thought of inviting you 5 or 8 or 7 or 9 who are more regular at our meetings to be the jurors, if you want, only if you want, of a competition, an international competition. And so you'll have the chance to evaluate the works and also express your own, ideas and so on. Or we could, I mean, my God, much can be done. I guess I'm beginning to be tired myself, but let's keep. Yesterday we had a nice day about Alvaro Siza and the Gaudi. Today we had this informal talk about well, less about the donkey, but about other things. Tomorrow, by the way of Bashlar, we can talk about what he meant when he said that man was created out for desire, not for need, or out of desire, not of need. So again, somehow this statement relates to Alvar Aalto's statement that architecture belongs to culture and not to civilization. I see culture connected with desire and civilization connected with need. And I think it's important to reflect on both. Anyway, you are probably tired too. I'm a little bit tired too, but I don't think it was was a lost evening or a lost day. What do you think? Anna, you are the most heroic one because you are supposed to prepare for exams, and instead you are here, on Zoom listening to, I don't know, maybe strange talks.
Actually, they're not strange talks for me. I mean, I'm happy that people think like me and we share the same opinions, and I can also see different opinions, listen to different opinions as well that I may have not considered in the past or might have thought of but forgot them. And I mean, for me, this is also educational, and it's the reason of living, to learn more, to connect more, and I don't know.